let's start the meeting. Welcome all on this beautiful warm day. We couldn't have really picked a better time for half term, couldn't we? And it is really good to see you also engaged in, well, you know, these issues that are really concern our city and the way we go forward. And it is a huge pleasure to have Sue Rigby with us this evening. And Sue, thank you for agreeing to, you know, be answering all these questions that we have to you. So let me just introduce you, Sue. Professor Sue Rigby is the Vice Chancellor of Bath University and has been in the post since January 2018. Sue is a paleontologist by background, difficult word for me to pronounce. After being an academic at Cambridge, Leicester and Edinburgh, she moved into senior management. Sue has filled many other roles as women of her caliber do. Her main interests revolve around student welfare and learning. Her biggest recent concern are about higher education funding and indeed the whole future of education. Sue, you started as a paleontologist and authored a number of books on caves, rocks and minerals. But I read somewhere that you were working on the life, habits and ecology of graptolites, an extinct group of plankton. Why? What drives you to do this?
I know, when I noticed that question at the start of this interview, I thought I have no good answer for that anymore, except paleontology is fascinating. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and there's been life on it for over 4 billion years. And it's the only planet in the galaxy that we know holds life. And all we see now is the moment of existence that we're in. And fossils are a glimpse of that 4 billion year history. And they're a glimpse that are, it's innately fascinating, Vera, but it's more than that. It's something that can give you a moment of the past that can feed into your understanding of the present.
Yes, and
so what I was trying to do was no, go on.
Well, absolutely. You've just already been touching on it. It's about understanding our world by being also able to look back a long way. And since we're talking about the climate emergency, you know, is that the context in which you're trying to understand, you know, what happens if you put a lot of carbon into the atmosphere?
Yeah, I mean, 50 million years ago in the Eocene, there was something like 4 times as much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as there is now, and there were very big ice caps. So what the past can give you is not an answer to the present, but it's a nuanced complexity that means that we don't think the present's very simple. And we understand that scientific models are contingent. That's got to be useful.
Does it sometimes sort of drive you crazy that we seem to be so careless with our planet, which, as you say, is just so special and so unique?
As an individual all the time, as a geologist, it doesn't bother me too much because, you know, lots of species have come and go. We think that we're more important than any others, but the planet's been fine without us and it'll be fine without us again. I just wish from a much more personal perspective that we get a grip on this stuff and not mess things up for our children.
I mean, this is what's been said a lot of the time in the climate crisis. The planet will survive until it explodes, but it's us who are not going to be there. And even if we are there, you know, what's the future for us humans if we are fighting over the land that is still around and that can be arable? And it's a humanitarian future that is not particularly nice, even if we're surviving. If the crisis is creating these massive global inequalities, doesn't it?
Yes, and you know, just the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us, I think, how easily we amplify inequality, but also what the benefits of being a bit greener are. I mean, we can't honestly in Bath anymore complain about a clean air zone, because having had clean air for 9 weeks, who'd go back? You know, there are some things that we've learned by doing that we'd never have agreed to by thinking about them.
So you moved from academia to senior management. What prompted that change?
Children.
Yeah.
truthfully. Research takes all the hours you can give it and then a few more. Senior management is something that you can partition and then go home and do other things. So I went into it for all the wrong reasons, but then I just decided I loved it. Being able to lead academics is the most privileged thing you can do, I think.
And I mean, it reflects very much, I find, the life stories of a lot of women. We do seem to end up with slightly interrupted careers that take you around corners and often come back to a certain point again. And of course, you develop a lot of different experiences, which are probably very valuable then also for the next role that you're taking on.
Yes, but I think, you know, given that we're thinking about students and universities, that's not a bad position to come from, because the guess now is that most of students graduating from uni will maybe have 5 or 6 careers during the time that they work. So, you know, bringing paleontology to bear on how you can make a campus virtual in a COVID-19 crisis is an oblique thing, and it highlights the kind of skills that you have to go undergraduates, because for sure the content of the degree is going to go out of relevance quite soon, and probably particularly for women.
Well, do you actually think that maybe women in this day and age are ultimately better role models of how careers are going? You know, it's not as linear anymore, is it?
It's not. I mean, I don't think they're better models, but I think they're more indicative, probably, because they aren't linear. And I think the number of people who are, let's say, under 30 now, who will just have one job for life, you could probably count on the fingers of one hand in Bath.
It's also quite an unsettling prospect for a lot of young people, isn't it? To not have the same certainty that you qualify for something and then you're in that. So this whole idea about lifelong learning fascinates me. We'll come back to your student well-being and student learning in a minute. I just wondered what attracted you to the job at Bath Spa University?
Went up to Newton Park campus for the interview and just saw how beautiful it was, and I thought there is nowhere else in the country where higher education is going on that looks like this. And everything that I learned about it through the selection process just showed me that Bath Spa has heart. It's very, very values driven. It believes in itself. It's a young university. It's optimistic. It really deserves to succeed. And it's got that willpower to make it successful. So it's not like anywhere else. And I felt drawn to it because it's unique.
Well, and I must say, you know, when I became the Member of Parliament here in Bath, I am so proud of our 2 universities, and it is so important to have these universities here. And sometimes we are forgetting what the universities actually bring to our life in Bath. And sometimes I'm a bit disappointed when there seems to be some sort of backlash against a number of students. You know, what would we be without the universities and the cities and towns who don't have them? They wish they had them. So you know, universities bring such an extra dimension to any place, really.
It's really kind of you to say. I mean, I agree with you. I think it's a delight to work with Ian. It's a delight to work with the University of Bath, and we're really complementary institutions. But equally, we have to be very sensitive to a small city that's got 2 big universities, or fairly big universities, living in it. And there are ways that we've got to accommodate to that so that we're seen as an asset, because we are an asset. Post-pandemic, intellectual property is what gets to the service sector or tourism. And what Bath has unparalleled is the intellectual property to thrive and have without the universities.
And I mean, again, I think our two universities and Bath College, they provide such a diverse offer, really, and I think that's particularly interesting, isn't it? It's a really 2 very different institutions. Do you think that sometimes, you know, that politicians sort of talk about higher education as if it was one thing, as if they were all doing, you know, all universities are doing the same thing, and we need to embed really this understanding that we need much more diversity in higher education?
It's always tempting to make a league table, isn't it? And nobody ever looks behind that league table to work out what guarantees a position in the rankings. But I think 2 million young people are in higher education. They can't all need the same thing. And that applies to the kind of course that they take, the nature of the offer, the location, the kind of people who teach them, the size of the institution. And once you start to factor that in, then you start to see the value of diversity. So, we teach mainly creative arts, we teach teaching, we teach some of the sciences, but we do it from a unique perspective. Bath University couldn't be bettered for the sciences, for a lot of business courses, though we do some of those as well. What you've got is it's like an ecosystem. You've got a variety of different places where different people will thrive. And what we really need is students to thrive.
Well, and isn't there also some sort of cross-feeding after all? I mean, you do your thing, you just said Bath Uni does their thing, and, Bath College is there as well in the higher education mix. But you can also work with each other at the same time, can't you?
Well, the three of us are working very closely together on a big bid to bring inclusive upskilling to Bath. We've called it iStart. It's something that Bath and North East Somerset Council, the college, us and Bath University are working on together. And the idea is that it will help people from all over Bath and more widely in the region to change career mid-track, to upskill, anything from basic training right through to setting up a business, tertiary education, PhDs. It'll all be available, and it'll be available because the three institutions collaborate. So, in what form it happens now is less clear, because we may not need a physical building for it anymore. But the idea that the three institutions can bring their strengths together is really compelling, I think.
You have been sort of developing a paper on this recently, but how far have you got with that idea?
Well, everyone likes the idea. The proposal for iStart's got a long way. So the West of England Combined Authority have approved the outline business case, and they've given us quite a lot of funding to develop the full business case. So we're really optimistic that that will go forward. And I think what we're trying to be responsive to is both the awareness that COVID-19 might have changed the parameters a little bit. It might be that we're a more virtual institution than we were. It also might have raised the need for quick support. Universities are very good at delivering over a 2 to 3 year timescale, something very solid and very reliable. But I wonder in this context whether we need something in the next 2 or 3 months, and whether we need to learn as we go on. And that's something that we're less experienced at, but we're very fast learners.
Yes, I mean, first of all, congratulations. I think when we spoke recently, about 4 weeks ago, I think it was still sort of in the making. So you've made progress, and as much as lockdown seems as if everything is sort of frozen in time, there's actually, a lot of stuff is actually happening and moving forward. And particularly people who are the thinkers and the ideas people. I think for a lot of them and those people who like to think outside the box, this is actually a great moment, because we do see some sort of restarting of a button, if I may call it like this. I mean, it might. I mean, the main thing that I hope we're not going to do is just go back to the normal, because the normal from before, because we need to rebuild the economy. People have got no other ideas of just going back to what was. And I think there's a great danger, but also a great opportunity to go and do something very different and hopefully better.
Yeah. Well, if you just think about this conversation, Vera, I mean, I don't know about you, but I couldn't use all these technologies 4 or 5, a few months ago. I'm still not very good at it, but I'm getting better. And what you've got is probably half the population that's had an absolutely phenomenal learning experience, getting online, learning how to work in meetings, learning how to work from home. We can't go back from that, because you couldn't have paid for a country to learn a new skill like that.
No, and it goes to show how sometimes, if we're all forced to do something rather than just having the option, and I'm saying that saying that being a liberal, but sometimes a little bit of very gentle pushing helps to make progress.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about how COVID has actually affected your university. What has changed so that we can sort of get a feel for it?
So in some ways everything, but essentially nothing. We went online within 5 days. We simply did it by asking staff and students to work out how to do it, and within 5 days they'd moved the whole of our learning and teaching offer online. There are some things obviously that it's very hard to do at distance, so some of our fine art students, ceramicists, some of our dance students have really had to be innovative in making that work, and clearly the quicker we can get back to a physical space the better. But essentially what a university does, which is learn and teach and think and grow, we just moved into the virtual space, and now the nightmare is trying to come back into a physical space in a way that keeps everybody safe.
You have obviously got a background in the student journey and have put a lot of effort into developing and teaching and the teaching environment, and now everybody is sort of sitting at home, and you're saying, well, hopefully we are coming back, but we might not be coming back that quickly. How are you supporting your teachers and your students in this really uncertain world now?
Well, the nice thing about a university of our size and being values-led is that they're looking after one another. So our staff are reaching out to our students, and our students are doing amazing innovative things. They've set up a hashtag Bath Spa Still Makes, and that's now being shared all over the UK as an example of good practice. So, you know, they're looking after one another, but there is a lot of stress around, and there is a lot of anxiety about the autumn. And I think it's being stirred up at the moment by all this kind of apocalyptic sense that we're never going to get back to the way we were. And whilst that's true, we're going to get back to something functional. And as we do that, there will be a way that universities can thrive there, because broadly we have a lot of space, particularly at Newton Park, in the new campus at Locksbrook. We have an enormous amount of teaching square meterage, as it were. All of our specialist facilities can be cleaned between uses. All of the learning that we do can happen in smaller groups, and it'll probably be better for it. So it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be fine. And I think what's driving our staff is that they are driven to teach and to look after the students. And what's driving our students is that need to create that brings them to our institution.
I mean, it's great to hear that positivity, because there is so much uncertainty around, and a lot of people are wondering, should they go, should they start a course, should they not start a course? I'm assuming you will be encouraging young people to head to uni in September.
Yes, my younger son will start university in September, and I'm absolutely sanguine that he should go and that it's the best thing for him. I mean, not just that I want him out of my house and I want the bedroom back or anything like that, but it will be a different experience. But I think by September, there's a very good chance that people will be able to get together and meet, socialise, maybe not in nightclubs under old buildings in Bath, but they'll be able to meet outside, they'll be able to make friends, they'll be able to do the essential stuff, the essential learning face to face, and then they'll be able to go back to their rooms and do a lot of the stuff that used to happen in lecture theatres in their bedroom. Well, lecture theatres aren't that sociable, so it will be different. It's easy to assume now it'll be less good, but I think it'll just be patchy, and some bits will be good and some bits will be rough. But starting university is like that too, even in a normal year.
I mean, we've been talking about the opportunities of making it also better coming out of COVID. One of the things that have obviously always been seen as a negative end of all these students in the city is a lot of speculative student development. Do you think COVID has put an end to that?
Well, there's certainly not going to be a lot of money around for a while. I mean, both Bath University and we have worked very hard with the council to reinforce that understanding that we are not growing. We have no intention to expand. And that means that an awful lot of this speculative development is going to be wasted anyway, because there aren't going to be more students. Now, it might be that it's better to have students concentrated in purpose-built blocks and out of HMOs, so the HMOs can go back for families. But that's a discussion that we're having very actively with the council to try and find a way to minimise the impact of students on Bath in a bad way and maximise the benefit of students in the sense of their liveliness, their engagement with ephemeral businesses, their money, their kind of sense of being creators and makers, and the fact that they fall in love with Bath and then they want to work here in the future. And the thing is, a place like Bath needs its talent. It needs a talent pool, and it can't rely on just being able to pull people in mid or late career.
But why, actually talking about retaining our students after they've graduated, why do you think that we are relatively not successful at keeping students compared to Bristol, for example?
Well, we talk to them about how much we dislike them for the 3 years when they're undergraduates, and you can't help but think that they might get a flavour for that and go somewhere that likes students. But what we found with our postgrads, with our teacher trainers, is that they come from all over the Midlands, up beyond Birmingham, down to the south coast, a kind of big lozenge. But the majority of them stay in Somerset when they graduate. And I think one of the things that universities are very good at is pulling talent into the place where they're located. And I think over time we'll get better at that as we lose the rhetoric of telling students they're awful for 3 years and then wondering where they've gone.
Well, I mean, I'm certainly working on the, you know, very much on making sure that students are welcome. And we, you know, we've been talking about what are the reasons why people seem to be, and I've been hearing this from many people across the city who are concerned that compared to other places, we seem to be particularly harsh on our students. And I find that very regrettable. And I do believe we need to create a more positive image around students and university. But I do believe a lot of it is to do with our very limited space, and we can't grow up, we can't grow out. So the competition on living space is obviously the bone of contention, really. I mean, do you think by actually working with a council and working with developers together, we could create better developments, also actually better for young people and students?
Yes, I absolutely think we could. I mean, our aim would be to develop more housing on campus, but the Duchy of Cornwall don't like that idea because it makes the campus more intensively developed. But we keep working with them. We've got to listen to people in Bath because students have managed to antagonise people to a degree that's really true, even when it's quite hard to pin down exactly what it is. And I think what we've got to do is step back and try and understand what the root causes of this are, not just the minor irritation. So last year, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Bath University, Bernie, and I went round doors in Oldfield Park. We knocked on the doors and we said, we're from the universities, tell us about the students. Everybody I talked to would start off by saying one of two things, but it's just the different way around. They would say broadly, we hate students, but we love the ones next door. They'd say, we really like the student who lives next door, but we hate students in general. And what they told were stories of students individually being kind, not always as thoughtful as they could be, but making life okay. And then a perception that students they didn't know made life worse. And I've noticed that in below the line comments in online newspapers as well. There'll be a lot of, if only the Vice-Chancellor would listen to this, and nobody ever listens to that. And occasionally I go on the comment thread and say, just get in touch with me, this is my email. And nobody ever gets back to me. So I think there's a rhetoric and then there's a reality.
Yes, and I mean but that's again, you know, almost as old as the hills. I'd say, you know, there's definitely a lot of people who think that politicians are absolutely useless. But then there are people kind enough to say, not you. So it's obviously always about the generalization, and we do unfortunately have the small minority that ruins it for the big majority. But I do believe we need to work a little bit at the culture here in Bath and North East Somerset to make sure that young people are welcome here. And yes, that we get student development if we do purpose build it, that it is actually, you know, doesn't destroy communities. And I think the more people work together, the better we can actually resolve, you know, one of these potential bones of contentions. Yeah. Just about, because we are going to open the discussion now to all the people in the room. Just one last question to you, Sue. Post-COVID and post-Brexit, we may see a huge loss of employment in certain sectors across our region. We will need to retrain a lot of workers. And you've already talked about the role of Bath Spa University, you know, in the thinking around working together. Is there anything else that you think Bath Spa can do in terms of retraining or helping people into jobs?
Well, the first thing is there is a downside, I mean a massive downside to this pandemic, but there is also an upside, and there'll be jobs that can be almost better done from your home, better done online. And then if you look at what demand is likely to be post-pandemic, it's probably a lot more in the way of entertainment streamed into your home space. It's probably more about looking for the opportunity to have a better quality of life. We've all learned to slow down a bit. Now we need to work out how to use that time that we've developed. And, you know, I think one of the strongest things already in this region is the creative industries. They're going to blossom as we recover from this pandemic. They can be done locally. They can be done with fairly low overheads. They can be streamed to everybody. And we're really good at that. I mean, the Southwest is one of the best spots for the creative industries in the UK. And even before the pandemic, creative industries were worth about 13 million quid an hour to the UK economy. It's like 111 billion a year. That industries like that are just going to thrive. And things like cybersecurity, you know, we're in that golden valley of cybersecurity up into Cheltenham and so on. Everybody's going to need cybersecurity now. We've got degrees in all of the creative arts, and we've got degrees in creative computing, cybersecurity. I don't want to sound like I'm boasting, but you know, a lot of things that will be really needed in the recovery. And then we're going to chunk those down into little bits, offer them initially to our own graduates because they're struggling to go into work, and then offer them across the region to anyone who needs them.
Well, Sue, I mean, this was a fascinating and packed for, well, 20, 25 minutes. Thank you so much for answering my questions, but I hope we have inspired lots of other people to ask you questions. I'm now handing over to Matt, who's going to manage the many questions that are probably coming to you from our audience. Thank you for the time being.
Thank you, Vera. Just to remind everybody that if you scroll your mouse, you'll see the chat box icon. If you click on that, your chat box should appear and you can stick questions in. We've got a question, just continuing that question on the performing arts. How do you view the future for the performing arts and live venues in particular? And will this affect your teaching?
I think it's too early to say yet. I think we're all terrified of the fact that all of, I mean, particularly in Bath, all of that amenity that's the festival, the theatres, Comedia, everything like that is shut at the moment. And the temptation is to think that that's it, it's over, it'll be shut forever. These things will come back. They'll just come back in a more COVID-friendly manner, I think. So they'll have to adapt. But also, I mean, I'm an opera buff and I've missed Glyndebourne and Loughborough and Bayreuth, and it's been a really miserable summer, I have to say, from that point of view. But live streaming from all over the Europe and indeed America too has brought opera right into our house. Now we've got to find a financial model for that, but once the financial model's there, there's no reason why the arts can't thrive. What we try and teach our students is to be resilient, but actually it's the performers who are most resilient because they already knew it was going to be difficult. You know, I think if you go to university to read accountancy, you probably expect an easy ride when it comes to the job market. If you come to read jazz music, you probably know it's going to be a struggle. But I think these things have to come back because humans need them.
Sorry, that question was from John. We have a question here from someone who's put the password into their name box, but the question is, what role does Bath Spa Uni have in helping Bath become a zero carbon city?
As big a role as we can possibly play. So our campus will be zero carbon in the decade, and we are using that in all of our campuses. So we learned lots of stuff at Newton Park, and now we're applying that to Locksbrook. So Locksbrook is carbon neutral. We're adapting all of the other places that we teach in to the best extent that we can. But we also teach all of our students about environmental issues, and we have a very active student union. So every student who graduates from us is aware of the climate, aware of its importance. We issued a climate emergency in parallel in partnership with the student union earlier this year. as much as anything else, we're doing our bit on our campuses, and we're trying to raise awareness in all of our students. As we've learned with the pandemic crisis, I think we need to do more, because we need to get our hands dirty on this, just like we've been making PPE for our UH. I think what we need to do now is offer Bath and the region our services in any way that we can. But I mean, for example, our degree in wildlife conservation will start next year, and at that point we'll have unique graduates. There'll be nowhere else in the country that offers that degree, and they'll be available to help community groups, national trust properties, parks, regions, to look at themselves from the point of view of how you make the best of the ecosystem that you've got and how you make it better.
Interesting, very interesting. I've got a question here from Felicitas. Sorry, car's just arrived. Many students prefer HMOs to purpose-built. If student numbers drop, will you reduce your prices on campus to compete with private landlords?
It's a tricky one. It's very specific, isn't it? I don't expect student numbers to drop enormously. There might be 1 year when it's harder for people to come into residence, and we'll all have to adapt to, you know, how you can accommodate students safely and keep them safe when they're in an HMO or whether they're in student accommodation. But after that, I think things will bounce back pretty much to the way they currently are. The pricing models are different. We would love to offer bigger discounts. The tricky thing is that we've also got arrangements with private providers, and we are contracted not to underbid them by more than a certain amount. So it's one of those things where nasty economics gets in the way of propriety. What we're very happy to do is work with a pricing incentive to meet what the council tell us they would like in terms of where they want students to go.
Okay, I've got a question here from Penny. Hi Sue and Vera, good to see you. Could you say a bit more about the civic role of the university being in service to the community, focusing on civic engagement and civic innovation, solving real world problems together? That sounds like a question for an academic.
Yes, doesn't it? It's a four-part question.
Sorry, Penny.
Universities have to be useful. When we redid our strategy recently, we decided that it's all right, Penny, we understand. What we decided was that universities have to look after their own community and be of use to the region, otherwise they're pointless. That requires that we're available to help, and the pandemic has been fantastic for that because we've been able to offer our services, and Bath Uni have been brilliant at that too. And people have been able to take us up on it. We have a duty to make sure that everybody in the region who wants to access our skills can come in and do that. And we're redesigning our structures to make that possible. People are actually quite reticent to come to university because it's hard to know exactly where to go. That just takes a little bit of familiarisation, I think. So open days, you know, we very much welcome people on campus. In fact, at the moment, it's the perfect time to come for a walk around Neaton Park because it's so beautiful.
Can I just come in there, because I've seen in the chat a further question of what I can do in my role as the MP to sort of make students and the universities more welcome. I think the best we can do, and we had this theme already, is really to work together and find opportunities together. So, you know, for example, we had our arts conference in the Locksbrook campus, which was absolutely wonderful. You know, these sort of taking events and being offered events in the premises that the university has, but me as the MP sort of coordinating a conference like this in the same way we had a conference up at Bath Uni for the climate emergency. So just also physically sometimes doing things together, but also absolutely talking about the importance of you know, the big ideas that move us as society forward. And the climate emergency is a perfect example where you know, the expertise of both universities, and be that, you know, around behavioral changes, but be that around the science around it. I mean, these are the things where we can work together, and where definitely politics, civic organizations and the universities could be a perfect partnership. So these are the ways I look at it.
Vera, that's a really good example, because I have a follow-up to that you might not know about. But because you organised that conference, and it meant that people in Bath got very early sight of what the Arts Council was thinking in terms of grassroots art, accessible art and so on, when the pandemic hit and arts bodies in Bath were immediately very short of money, they were all able to coordinate bids for the emergency fund that met those new criteria. Every single bid has been successful. And at the moment, it's standing at about £130,000 that's come in from the Arts Council to entities in Bath that were at that conference, that were probably successful because they could hear what, really from the horse's mouth, what was needed. So, you know, these things, you never know when they're going to be financially successful. You never know when they're going to just stimulate a good idea. The stuff that Penny does around Forest of the Imagination, you know, populates Bath with imagination for children once a year. As a university, we're delighted to support that. And as a politician, we really value the support that you give to that kind of thing. And piece by piece, we build on it, piece by piece, your conference, and then the bids, and then financial success, and then maybe more of our arts entities in Bath will survive the pandemic than would have done otherwise. It's amazing.
Jolly good. So that question was from Joseph, and he asked a second part to Sue. Does the university have the necessary power to decide whether or not it opens in September, or is it down to the government? How much do you have to listen to what the government says?
Well, we always listen to everything the government says, and if I have any need to drive to Durham, I'll make sure that I only do it for good, proper reason. We really value a coordinated approach, in all seriousness, but we are autonomous institutions. So at the moment, what we're doing is planning to reopen in September, but we're planning for anything that would normally have lots of students in one space, like lectures, to be delivered online instead. And then everything that requires specialist facilities to be able to be used on hands-on. And what would be very useful is for the government to help us to develop tactics that help us to reopen. But I think they'll do that by reopening schools. And the biggest limit for us, just like it is for any retail or entertainment outlet, is the 2 metre distance, because we need to keep people safe. But keeping 2 metres apart means that my biggest lecture theatre, which normally seats 230, will seat 19.
Blimey. Ah.
Then if it dropped to 1 metre distance, how could you seat 50? And at that point, we're in business again.
Yeah. Gosh. We have a comment just from Mark to say the world always needs accountants. And
of
then from Tim. Hello, Tim. I live just up the road from the university in Marksbury Village. As the VC said, the university has a superb rural campus. What is Bath Spa doing to make students more aware of our rural environment and not just the city of Bath? And you did mention your new wildlife course, was it?
Yeah, wildlife conservation. We have lots of student societies that use the outdoors, you know, for recreation and entertainment, and learn about the natural environment. We have degree courses that look at that, so geography, environmental sustainability, wildlife conservation. We have all sorts of on-campus facilities that encourage students to look around them. So we have bat cams, and we have otter updates, and we have newt ponds. And I think a lot of students who come to Bath Spa come partly because it's an outdoor campus, but there's always so much more we could do, because, you know, I was driving out the other day and there were 12 herons on that little kind of stream that comes out of the two lakes. And that's amazing. You know, you don't see that in the Scottish Highlands, and yet there they are in the middle of rural Somerset. So there's always more we can do, but we do try to make sure we've got a brilliant estate manager who tries to engage students, whether it's giving them allotments or just enjoying the walks that can be had around campus. We try to make sure that people are out there. There's always more we could do.
Well, and I'll give a big up to the beekeepers teaching apiary, which is on the top of the hill. And also through my orchards, I have a footpath, and I did meet one of your lecturers who was just having a wander and having a stop for a chat. It's very nice. So we have a question from Councillor Stevenson McGall, and both Bath Spa University and the University of Bath are products of historical mergers of a range of institutions. You have talked about some of the areas you're working together with University of Bath and Bath College, and that you have different discipline mix. There is chatter in the sector that mergers may be needed in some parts of the country due to finances. Is there scope for further collaboration and/or joint working short of a merger?
There's always scope for joint working. I have an agreement with Ian White that if there's ever a question of a merger, we will talk to one another first. I don't think it would be very likely we'd merge with anyone else. Actually, both institutions have taken a big hit in the pandemic, because everyone has, but both of them are quite resilient. So you can never say never. But I think Bath is well served at the moment by having 3 institutions that can plot their own strategy and fit best as they can into the region and nationally and internationally, but work closely together. And we've spent the last couple of years really learning how to work together from a backstory where possibly 5 years ago the universities didn't see a lot of call to do that. And I think what you'll see in the next year or so are real strides to work where it makes sense. We work together. Where our strengths are better directed outside, then that's what we do.
We've got a couple of comments because the number of questions seems to be rising up. A comment from Penny to say that Forest of Imagination is currently online, and a thanks from Joseph for answering his questions, and a thank you from Mark. Question from Ryan. We recently saw some vulgar words written on the side of student accommodations. What can the Universities Council and our MP do to encourage future students into the City of Bath?
That's a really good question. Students really want to come to Bath. When they come to our open days, they are fulsome about how beautiful the city is and how beautiful the campus is and how much they want to study with us. Bath's quite expensive, and there's not a lot any of us can do about that. But a lot of students can offset that by finding work. And in doing that, they make a very flexible workforce for Bath, because they can swell the ranks at Christmas and they can be laid off, if you like, during term time sometimes. So I think it's about perhaps being a bit kinder to, it's not about being kinder to students, it's about being kinder to those individuals who at this stage in their life are studying at university. You know, they're not a group of people, they're individuals, and they all have different needs and different things they can give, and they want to contribute and they want to learn, and a lot of them are very young. And just perhaps being a bit kinder to Amy and Stephen and David and Patricia, who are just starting their careers at university. But what I need to be very clear about is we are not trying to attract more students to Bath. We're trying to attract the kind of students who will thrive with us. And we don't want to be twice the size we are now. And I don't think the University of Bath does either. What we want to be is financially stable, but we really like the size we are. We don't want to grow a lot. So we don't need to attract more, just nice.
Sorry, since it was also slightly directed to me, one of the ideas that came up in one of the groups that I am part of in Parliament, that was the old party parliamentary group on social integration, looked at intergenerational integration, and how actually we are increasingly having generations living apart from each other because we don't have these sort of multi-generational households anymore, and people don't really, young people are not so much in touch with older people, and yet when they do meet, there's so many interesting and fruitful things that they can learn from each other. So there are opportunities of bringing older people and students together, for example, and those are things that I'm sure universities are looking at as well. And be that only that some, and we know now, isolated, lonely person next door could do with a bit of shopping, and that way sort of increasing contact. I mean, it can be done informally. Sometimes it helps to have sort of programs where people can join in, where we can bring students and older people and people from outside and people who live here already together. So these are the things that I'm quite interested to look into.
Yeah, we'd be very, very keen to support you with that, because we ran a pilot in the last couple of years at Newton St Low, inviting people who live in the village and were not confident with technology to come and meet students who'd help them with the tech. And that worked a treat. And it meant that our students got to know people in the village, and so were much more likely to be very respectful than if they just thought they were beautiful houses. The people in the village got to like our students. And then last year at the nativity, at the Christmas carol service, a lot of the people who'd been to those digital drop-ins came to the Christmas service. And so we've got to make communities, I think, and that's people of all ages, and predominantly it's people, not groups of people, individuals, you know, not students, the young, the old, the dispossessed. It's got to be all of us, just finding ways to interact, hasn't it? And your role as a politician is key to that, Vera, and I think you do a really good job.
And just a quick comment from John to say, I hope you weren't discouraging jazz studies. The world needs more jazz. Best way out of the pandemic. Comment from Sean McGall, Stevenson McGall. Thank you, Sue. It's very helpful. From Tim saying, thank you for my response, for your response to my question. I'm a member of your business network, which I can recommend to everyone. So that's good.
Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Sean McGall is back. Stevenson McGall, how do we encourage both your students and staff to take more active travel choices where appropriate to help the personal health, improve air quality, reduce long-term impact on the NHS, and of course help tackle the climate emergency? Because most students are using the bus in and out. What's the parking like? I know the parking's not good.
Parking's not good. Actually, the pandemic might be perfect for this, because we honestly don't know how to get our students on buses out to the campus and back into the centre of Bath. So we're looking at bikes, we're looking at anything we can think of that would be green transport, and also driving less between sites. So one thing we're experimenting with is getting students only working on one campus, and just practically in COVID terms that makes sense, but every journey you don't take is less carbon emitted. We are very keen to pursue the idea of cycleways that go from Newton Park right into the railway station, and of course we're only a spur off the Bath-Bristol cycle path, and all we need to do is make sure that we don't antagonise other cyclists by, you know, every September putting 6,000 inexperienced cyclists in their way as they try and get to and from work. But we are trying hard. I don't know if we can ask Sean what Bath University is doing about that.
See the answers in a minute. Well, we've got a question from Chloe, who works in research administration at Bath Uni. I wondered if you had any comments on the research aspect of Bath SPA's work to focus it more. I wonder if you see ways research will contribute to Bath and also contribute to making communities in Bath.
I think that's a really good question. I mean, we have real pockets of research excellence, and the one that probably is worth highlighting in this context, there are many, but the one I think is worth highlighting is the amazing work Kate Pullinger does, where she's one of the people who's looking at the digital affordances in creativity. She's got big grants from all sorts of organisations to look at that, and she's using Palace News as a space for small businesses to set up for innovation. They're doing a series of fellowships where people who are already successfully employed in the creative industries can take a sabbatical from that's paid and learn a new technique or plan a new way of doing things under Kate's kind of mentorship, and then go back. So we have that kind of jewel, and it's just behind Brisley. It's open to everybody, and I think it is starting to make a big difference. I mean, one of Kate's specialisms is ambient literature. So it's saying, well, if we're reading books on our iPad or on a mobile device, you can write them in such a way that they reflect where you are, what time of day it is, what the weather's like, and you can tell a story that's the same story but has different nuances and flavours. Or actually you can tell stories that are different every time you read them because you're in a different place, and perhaps even an emotional place when you read them. And on the one hand, you can think, well, you know, you couldn't do that with Shakespeare, but I bet Shakespeare would have done something amazing with an iPad if he had one.
Indeed. We've just got time for a couple more questions, I think, as we started a bit late. Quick comment from Andrew, too busy taking notes to ask a question, so that I think that's good. Ian asks, given your experience of working in Edinburgh, my own alma mater, do you have any thoughts about what Bath can learn from another great 18th century city, British city, about how to be both a wonderful tourist destination and a place that celebrates thoughts and ideas?
Yes, it's the powerful thing about Edinburgh is that it sees itself as the home of the Scottish Enlightenment, and that gives it a root identity which is intellectual. And most people couldn't tell you what the Scottish Enlightenment was, but lots of people will tell you that David Hume and, you know, all the different people who were in that sort of 19th century intellectual powerhouse are part of Edinburgh's fabric. Bath sees itself, I think, as a Regency pleasure space, and yet has, through that connection, links with the intellectual and artistic development of the UK. If we can pull that together and not just say, you know, Jane Austen lived in Bath for a while, but really own the fact that great literature was made in Bath, then I think that gives us a shared identity that means that the universities can be seen as participants in a great city, contributing to that creative and innovative way of thinking.
I mean, there's also, if I may add to that, the history of medicine actually is closely linked to Bath as well. And now this newfound science almost of well-being. So all of these things are, you know, very modern ideas about what makes us live and live well, definitely are very much connected to Bath, and we could probably do a lot more with that.
Sean Stevenson McCall's come back with a survey that your students could fill out, so we'll pass it on to you. And Peggy's come back with the link to Professor Kate Pullinger's research centre.
Magic.
So a couple of helpful links there. Question from me. I'm a parent of an A-level student who was building up to these massive exams, which are now not going to happen. And then there's all the uncertainty as well about what's going to happen in September. So what's your advice? Year out or go for it in September?
My son's going in September, but then he's just had a year out. I think it's worth a conversation with your child, and to get a sense of what she would like and what her ambitions are and what she could do if she didn't go to university. I think the only thing I would be horrified at is the idea that any young person thinks, I won't go to university for a year, and they spend a year sitting in their bedroom wondering what to do with themselves. You know, so there are lots of viable options that she should probably think about anyway, in terms of volunteering, exploring the world in different ways, but not do nothing. When you should go to university is when you're ready to go. And I don't think anybody should rush it, but I don't think you should be put off by the pandemic. And I think universities are safe spaces to explore the world, so that when the world's changing quickly, they might be quite reassuring spaces, because they're all about intellectual churn all the time. They normalise oddity. And so in a truly odd environment, they might paradoxically feel a little bit more companionable.
Thank you. Back to you, Vera.
Well, you know, this was just the most amazing hour. We packed so much into this, Sue. And you know, to see how we as a city can grow together and do things well together, I think should have inspired absolutely everybody on this call. So, you know, thank you so much again. We are keeping these conversations going. You know, it's brilliant to see so many people in the virtual space now. That's an advantage of COVID. It's easier to come together in this way. But ideas sort of float around, whether it's a virtual or a physical space. So please come again to our next events. Matt, have we got something in our diaries already? Can we just quickly talk about that one?
Yes, well, sorry, I'll see if I can bring my video back. There we go. That's been slightly flummoxed by technology. Yeah, so in 2 weeks' time, we've got the amazing Reverend Roger Driver, who turned his church into a PPE factory. Really galvanised everybody, and so we're really looking forward to talking to him in 2 weeks' time.
Right. Well, thank you again, everybody, for coming. I spent the rest of this beautiful summer evenings having a good time. Don't get too gloomy about lockdown, but we're not still out. We're still not out of it. It's important to stay safe. I keep saying this message: stay safe is the most important thing. But we'll get through this, particularly if you've got fabulous people like Sue, who's got a very positive vision. And let's see where we are in a year's time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vera. It's been a pleasure.